Today we're going over how to grow your business with Pinterest as an elopement photographer. If you're looking for a way to get new clients without spending all day on social media, Pinterest could be the perfect platform for you. And before we get started, in case you're interested, I offer a DIY Pinterest course or done-for-you Pinterest services on my website. Okay, why Pinterest? Pinterest is the perfect way to reach new clients without the social media hamster wheel. It's a visual search engine, not traditional social media, so the work you put in can last for months or even years. You don't have to film yourself, and you can batch pin several days at a time. How Pinterest marketing works for elopement photographers. Pinterest is a great platform to drive traffic to free, educational, or nurturing content like blog posts, client galleries, or lead magnets, and act as the first step in your funnel. Here's how a Pinterest sales funnel might look. So you start with your eye-catching Pinterest pins or photos that you're sharing. They go to helpful blog posts or portfolio pages or client galleries, and then you might promote something like a free lead magnet or service or pricing guide, and then you send nurture emails and make sales from there. Someone finds your blog posts or photos on Pinterest, they click through and discover you through your website. They may save your pins for later, sign up for your pricing or services guide, or even reach out to you to learn more about your photography services, all because you started with free value on Pinterest. My 2X method for Pinterest. For creative service providers, I like to use my 2X method. That means there will be two sides to your content strategy for Pinterest, educational and promotional. That means creating both educational, nurturing blog posts, as well as linking to past client work or service pages. Think of Pinterest as a sales funnel. First, choose where your traffic will go. Is it a blog post, a freebie, a client gallery, or service page? Make sure your content solves a problem or answers a question. This will inform your keyword research. Include a strong call to action on each page with the next action you want someone to take, such as filling out your inquiry form or signing up for a free lead magnet. What do you need in place to get started? Okay, I always recommend having your own website and domain name, a Pinterest business account with your domain claimed for analytics, at least 10 published blog posts or pages on your website, and ideally a mix of educational blog posts and posts or pages that showcase your client work. Okay, now I'm going to go over how to do keyword research 3 different ways, 2 free and 1 paid. Starting out, I'm on the homepage of Pinterest.com, and you can just come up here to this search icon, and then as an elopement photographer, you really want to target locations and be as specific as you can so you don't just reach a completely broad general audience that is not even in the right destination or location or city and isn't going to hire you. So you do want to use location-based keywords whenever you can. It is okay to create some of the broader educational content because, it'll reach more people, and also maybe your clients are just interested in some of that content, or maybe they have questions about, the destinations or the process or how you work and all of those things about hiring a photographer. So it's okay to do some of the broader content, but you also want to do a lot of the really location-specific content and use those types of keywords so you are reaching the right people. Okay, so let's say Chicago. So I'm gonna start typing like a Chicago elopement. Okay, now as I'm typing that, Pinterest will show me all of these autocomplete options. So there's Chicago elopement photography, elopement ideas, elopement photos, city hall weddings, aesthetic, winter, things like that. And then there's also one account showing up on here because it seems like their account was, well optimized with the keywords in their profile and it's being recommended by Pinterest. So that can also happen too. But yeah, if I'm looking for Chicago elopement, now this one could either be something like a potential blog post to showcase a particular couple, or something like Chicago elopement photography or Chicago elopement photographer. It could be used in a lot of places like your profile title or your profile description, potentially some of the board titles or board descriptions, things like that, or even pin titles or pin descriptions if it's relevant. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna do, I guess, to first start with a broader example. So if I just do Chicago elopement photography, that one's really broad. You wouldn't want to only have a blog post that's just called Chicago elopement photography or photographer. Instead, you would want to incorporate that along with other phrases or titles, or again, use it in your profile so people can find you. Okay, and these all look like photos, this would probably be very competitive to rank for because it's such a broad keyword. So ideally you would want to get more specific in your actual posts and pages, but that just shows you what people are kind of expecting when they search for this. And it does look like people are expecting individual photos for the most part. It looks like there's a handful of posts here, like where to take wedding portraits in Chicago. So that kind of gives you ideas for the types of topics you could be talking about. But otherwise, if you wanted to do like something for a particular couple or a blog post, then you might want to get even more specific with the location. So I'm going to go back and say Chicago elopement. And then one example was Chicago elopement city hall weddings. And it is okay to kind of like reword it a little bit so it just like makes sense for whatever you're using it for. Okay, for instance, here's one, Chicago City Hall elopement / wedding. So that looks like an instance of, so Chicago City Hall elopement. And then, I mean, you don't have to do this, but they also added Chicago, Illinois and title, and then Shauna and Jordan photography. Yeah, I would say you don't necessarily have to use like the name of your business in the pin title because it's already here. But, if you were concerned about someone like stealing your work, then maybe you'd want that. And also it looks like there's kind of a watermark on there, which is fine. But it looks like this one is going to a particular blog post. It looks like it's called Downtown Chicago City Hall Elopement for Clara and Jacob. So that's just showing you an example of this blog post would be showcasing a particular couple, and you can kind of tell the story of their elopement day and your process and all of that, and details about the couple, anything about their love story, that kind of thing, your style, your favorite shots, and then sharing lots of the photos. And then you not only can share, an image like this where you have the blog post title on it, you can also share all of the individual images to Pinterest as well and link those back to your blog post. So instead of just linking to, perhaps a client gallery that just has like no text on that page, there's nothing that's really going to help you for SEO or for Google, you can take your client galleries and turn them into individual blog posts and then kind of tell a story. And then also weave in a whole bunch of your photos so you can also share those on Pinterest. And then you're getting multiple uses out of it because you're not only getting all the individual photos that you can share, but you're also getting, as many of these pins that you want with the text on it. And you could add text to, pretty much an unlimited number of them over time. You don't have to do it all at once, and I wouldn't share, the same link just over and over again because that could be spammy. But over time, you could certainly take, each and every photo and add a title to it, and then those would be completely new images on Pinterest. Okay, and then going for another example, I'm going to back up and do another way to talk about elopements is some people would maybe call it a wedding still, or a small wedding, or also a micro wedding. So those are some other angles that you could potentially take, and just keeping in mind, like, some of your clients might call it something different. So if you want to attract, different types of people, then maybe in certain blog posts, you're calling it something a little bit different. Or like this one's talking about a courthouse wedding. So someone might be looking for a courthouse wedding photographer or a city hall photographer versus an elopement photographer or a micro wedding photographer. And those are just all different ways that a potential client could be potentially thinking about what they're looking for. And you ideally want to show up for any and all of them. So you're not using all of those keywords for one blog post or one portfolio, but instead each one can kind of take a different angle. And depending on your research, if you find one that seems to be better than the others, you can go for that. Or if there seems to be no difference, or there's a lot of good content showing up for all of them, then you can just kind of pick and choose. For instance, maybe you've done more than one Chicago City Hall wedding, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm using the same keyword. So instead of using the same keyword over and over for each couple, you could do a different one each time, if it makes sense. Like you have Chicago City Hall elopement for such and such couple, and then you have Chicago City Hall micro wedding for another couple, and something like that if it makes sense for what you're doing. So that would be a way to talk about similar ideas or similar locations, but get different keywords out of it without just like repeating yourself over and over. Okay, you could also go for like either city, state, province, that kind of thing, depending on where you're based. Let's say like Rhode Island would be probably a little bit smaller, so maybe you'd want to target the whole state. So if we do like elopement, let's see if anything comes up. Okay, that one looks like it's a lot smaller because there's only 2 suggestions on here. Okay, and in this case, it looks like, okay, there's some products on here. Yeah, so some really common ones would be the best places to elope in, either the city, state, province, or places to elope in that location, or this is Block Island, adventurous elopement. That looks like a particular location in Rhode Island. Yeah, here's another one, a secret elopement, non-traditional wedding venues. Non-traditional might be another keyword that people tend to use if they're looking for, kind of an elopement photographer. Maybe they're also interested in a non-traditional day. So that would be another angle you can kind of go after. Here's rocky coastline elopement in Newport, Rhode Island. That would be a good one for showcasing a particular couple if that's something you actually had content about. Or how to elope in Rhode Island. Summer elopement, that's another one, thinking about the season. Romantic Rhode Island elopement. There's another one, or you're just, kind of adding some extra words to make it more interesting. Okay, and then another way to do keyword research would be with Pinterest trends. So this is just trends.pinterest.com. And some of these wouldn't necessarily be relevant, but that's okay. There's shopping trends, search trends. There's a lot of like nails, outfits, that kind of thing. There's also seasonal trends, top monthly trends, and top yearly trends. Okay. And then editors picks and Pinterest predicts. So not all of these would be relevant. Something like laced up from Pinterest predicts might be relevant if you have something for that. But otherwise, you don't have to just make content for this if it's not relevant what you're doing. But you can also search Pinterest trends, which can be useful. Now, I will say that not everything shows up on here. It tends to be a little bit more limited in what they're actually showing you the search volume and the data for. But I could just start typing, let's say like Boston elopement. And okay, it looks like it's not really showing up. Now, if I back up and try to do maybe like wedding and see if it's better. Okay, that's not showing up either. Okay, I think this one is maybe not showing me all of the locations. So instead, I'm just gonna start typing elopement and see what I can do. How about elopement ideas? Okay, that's one of them. Yeah, so that one is showing, let's see, 76, 74, and this is out of 100 for the popularity. So that one's very popular. However, this one doesn't have a location attached to it. So you would want to add your own location. And for this one, let's see, we eloped announcement. Oh, small private wedding. That looks like another way that people are searching for this type of topic. Looks like it's very popular in November, maybe January, February. Okay, there's some spikes in the traffic. And then we're also comparing these. So relative to each other, elopement ideas is still in like the 70s and 80s. And then small private wedding is like 3, 5, 7. So there are still people searching for it, which means you can still use that keyword, but elopement ideas is a lot more popular. Now, sometimes it is the case that some of the smaller keywords can be less competitive. That's not always the case, but sometimes that's true, especially if there's, if it's a long tail keyword and there's a few words like this one. That one's 3 words compared to 2, so it potentially could be a little less competitive, although you have to try it and see. Okay, there's also simple elopement ideas or micro wedding. That's another way to word it and another way that people might be searching for this. It'll also show you the demographics, gender, and then some popular pins. Okay, yeah, places to elope, common elopement mistakes. That could be another type of blog post you do, especially if you add your location to it, so it's not attracting absolutely everyone. And then the final way to do keyword research is with a paid keyword research tool like PinClicks. There's also ones like Pin Inspector. I like this one because it'll show you the actual search volume and the number for that, which can be useful. And it'll also show you a lot more of the really small topics that might not necessarily show up on something like Pinterest Trends. So I'm going to search for, let's try Boston elopement on this one and see if anything pops up. And then I just have interest checked over here. Okay, so in this case, this one is actually showing me there's a search volume of 308 per month. And then I can see what some of the popular pins are here. Now, 300 people a month is not a huge search volume. However, it's likely to be a very high search intent. It's kind of potentially a buyer intent, because if someone is looking specifically for a Boston elopement, then most likely they are thinking about eloping in Boston. So it is a very targeted audience, I would say. And you don't necessarily need to get, that much traffic or that many clients from a site like Pinterest if it's a very high intent. If this is people in Boston planning an elopement, then maybe it's specific enough that you don't need that many people compared to some of the broader ones. If it's not even the right location, then it doesn't matter because they're not necessarily going to be your client versus a more targeted one like this. This one, it looks like there's certain blog posts like Boston elopement in 5 steps, but mostly I would say individual photos. Also, these are vertical photos typically. Sometimes square is okay. I wouldn't do too much with horizontal because it's just not the optimal dimensions for Pinterest. But here's 5 easy steps to elope in Boston Public Garden. That's another one where they've targeted a very specific location. You could also do a variation of that for, if you had a particular couple, you could do something like that. There's also some related interests here. You would want to keep in mind like which ones are actually relevant to your location. So you could do something like vintage elopement in addition to the location, but if you only did this, then it's gonna reach people just all over, and that might not be what you want. Okay, another one is engagement photos. If that's relevant to what you do as a photographer, that is another angle you can go after. Okay, and then there's some boards here. Yeah, Boston elopement locations. That could be a board that you create and then you share your pins to that as well. Or Boston elopement photographer as a board title. Yeah, lots of individual photos. Here's the best places to elope in Massachusetts. That's another option to do some content for the cities that you target as well as some for the state. Or if you're willing to travel, you can go after those as well, but kind of have one main keyword for your main profile and main boards. Okay, Boston wedding photo locations, Boston City Hall weddings. Yeah, and even if you do just elopements, you could also sprinkle in some wedding keywords because you're still going to reach people who are trying to get married and, maybe they're not quite decided yet. Are they hiring a wedding photographer or an elopement photographer? Or maybe someone wants to elope and they are still thinking like, oh, I need to search for a wedding photographer. They don't even realize they could be searching with different keywords. They might just be looking for a photographer, so you can also use some of the broader wedding keywords as well. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and if you're interested in working together, I offer a DIY Pinterest course or done-for-you Pinterest services on my website. Let's get your content working for you 24/7.